So as we're loading it, I'm looking basically at how humans actually affect ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, how we can assess that, and also how we can. Is it okay now? And also how we can mitigate the effect of those anthropogenic, so human effects. So it's actually a long lecture, and I just got talked out. I only have 12 to 15 minutes, so I'm going to crawl through it. There is a lot of information. I was given the title, so we're going to talk about stormwater retention and detention ponds, and we're going to look at the research I've done since 2005 and look at how we can manage them better. And I think Ernesto talked about that very greatly, so hopefully I'll do as well. I'm going to, here it goes, to say that we're all parts, and I see here parts of the problem. So the reason you're here is because you're concerned about those problems, and make sure that you talk to other people about this problem, how you can solve it, right? The idea is that you spread the word, right? So here's just a statement from Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds that says, we're all part of the problem. This is true, we all are parts of our problem, tiny parts of it. And I will digress a little bit here. I come from a background where I studied stormwater treatment areas, and here we're looking at the Everglades, and the Everglades has been very greatly impacted by a change of the flow and nutrients, okay? So we're gonna make those nutrients travel through the Everglades in the right way, so having the timing of the water moving at the right pace, and also the nutrient must be in control, okay? So what we have done in the Everglades is that we have constructed stormwater treatment areas, which are constructed wetlands. So basically filter marshes, okay? And we have a lot of it, and they work pretty well by basically getting the water a high concentration of nutrients and then treating those nutrients to background level so we can release that water down to the Everglades safely. So here we have high amount of phosphorus getting in, and then we use different technologies from cattail, which is typha, to different submerged aquatic vegetation. And then we use algae, because you have also good algae that can actually help you polish the water so the water escape from those stormwater treatment areas so it's clean. So this is why I talked to you about it, because we do it at a grand scale, but we also do it at a smaller scale. This is what those detention ponds are. They actually are ecological filters. They're not only for flood mitigation, but they also are used to clean the water. And the least amount of lawn you use and fertilizer you use, the better they will be cleaning your water, the better they will be filtering your water. So look at them as a little filter marsh as those STAs that we have south of Lake Okeechobee. Okay, so what I like to see is, native plant, and you have a great booth over there about planting native that don't demand a lot of water, fertilizer. It looks beautiful. And, remember, grass is not, lawns are not really from Florida. They got engineered to be in your lawn. So we do a lot of work with Ernesto and others about educating the public about alternative to lawns, and really this is very important here. So again, what you see here is just a snapshot of the ecosystem, and you have that water moving through different vegetation until they reach the open water. And really for those ponds, the water in the pond is not a good way to clean water. What's growing around the pond is, all right? So keep that in mind. So here, regarding the timing, so this is a pre-urbanization, not a lot of people, you have a lot of pervious surfaces where the water will be able to infiltrate and recharge the aquifer, the groundwater. And then a little bit will be eventually be filtered by the vegetation. Okay, now we have a lot of impervious surfaces that collect eventually nutrient, dust, etc., because dust is also a pollutant. And then it will be getting into those ponds. That's what those ponds are for. They're intercepting that water. And then you're going to have some treatment so that the water will be leaving those ponds with good water quality. At least 80% of the bad stuff, the pollutant, will stay within those ponds. Those are like decantation pits, so the sediment will go to the bottom, and then they also will be ecological filter, especially if they're well vegetated. And then the water that will leave will be 80% clean. And normally they also are supposed to recharge the aquifer. So I have a couple slides here that shows the code. It's not really important, but remember about 80% is what it should be cleaning the water for. So here you have more information. You also have different type of pond, and everybody wants wet pond because you'll see people want to have a lake view. You know, we advertise those ponds as lakes, right? They don't want to be living next to a swamp or a marsh, and I don't understand. Swamps are beautiful, and they really are much better ecological filters than those ponds. So normally you have the choice to choose between a wet or a dry detention pond, and a dry detention pond is above the water table, so it will drain and recharge much better the aquifers than a detention pond would do, a wet pond. That's an example here of a wet pond, you know, those lakes that you have pretty much everywhere. How many do we have? A lot of them, you know, about 10,000 between Lee and Clara County. When you pull them all together, and, you know, the number increases, of course, because as you're building more housing, you know, you have more of those ponds. And they're small in average, but when you combine them all together, that's about 1.5 times the surface area of the Caloosahatchee River. So that's actually quite a bit of a footprint when you combine them all together. And those ponds naturally will turn into an Everglade-like system. So when you see this, you should pat yourself in the back. This is good stuff. Ernesto, I know the people are really have a problem. This is actually the periphyton. So I wish everybody who actually is moving to Florida would get to the Everglades and see what the system looks like. It actually looks like that. It's a very weird system with low nutrient. You're growing tremendous amount of good periphyton, so good attached algae. And those algae are warranting your water quality, good water quality. So they do a lot of benefit, you know, they are removing nutrients, they're sequestering nutrient and keep it forever, they're oxygenating the water, so it's like a natural enhancer for your pond. So if you see those floating algae, they're good algae. Now the problem is that people look at those ponds as lakes and they want to turn them into what they see up north, you know, those glacial lake appearance. So they bought the house for the view, they don't really use the pond, but just for the view. And again, they are not very good at sequestering nutrients. So all the effort should be to maintain your vegetation all around the pond so that actually you have a good, healthy water quality, and the pond is actually a good ecological filter. Now, as you know, most people like to have front views, so they make those very convoluted ponds. So everybody has a piece of view, which is a lot of problem because they also have lawns, and that also increase the amount of, you know, phosphorus and nitrogen, as Ernesto was outlining, getting into the pond. They have a benefit, you know, their real estate value increases 9% in average, right, when you have a front view versus a non-front view for comparable. And of course, they want the lawn because that's what they have up north, you know, it's natural there. Unfortunately, here in Florida, lawns use a lot of water and you have to fertilize to keep it green. The other problem is reclaimed water. So I'm not showing all the research here, but reclaimed water comes as one package. You need the water for watering your lawn during the dry season, but the plants, actually the lawn, don't grow very well during the dry season. So they're not really using the nutrient that is in the reclaimed water. And then when you have the first flush, eventually you have those nutrients that will flush into your lake. And then, you know, when you have the good algae, some people don't like them and, you know, spray them with algaecide, and eventually you end up with bad algae that will take place. So this is the green algae, and you're getting into what we call eutrophication, so a process where you have a lot of nutrient into your ponds. Okay, so you've seen those, right? It's not uncommon. I say that the pond are supposed to retain 80% of the nutrient, and this was an example. Everything in red shows that they actually are not removing nutrient because they actually are providing nutrients. So when you see a negative number, it means they're providing nutrients to the downstream ecosystem. All right? So I studied a bunch of ponds. This is just a little cluster here, and just to show you that when you are on the high scale, so that would be your y-axis, or vertical axis to the right, when you get to the hyper-eutrophic, meaning really nutrient-rich to eutrophic, nutrient-rich, you can see that most of the ponds I studied are nutrient or hyper-nutrient-rich. So lots of nutrient, hyper-eutrophic. This is an example of Pelican Landing, so it's right next to us. I did 11 ponds, and I'm really using that example because I also had access to the amount of pesticide that those management companies are using. This is from Lake Masters, by the way. And Lake Master really want to do the right thing, but people also want to have their pond treated. You know, they're responding to what the people want. You got to keep that in mind. They can do the right thing if you ask them to do the right thing. So you're really the driver. And here what you can see is that the amount, there's a lot of information here, but basically it means that the algae do not respond to the treatment. meaning we get to a point where we're treating, but we're not having any impact on controlling the algae. So we use more and more, but really the treatment don't work anymore because the algae you have selected the algae that actually will not respond to the treatment. Copper sulfate is one of the most major ones that's being used, and this is just a picture showing you Naples Bay, and the red shows that when you have high elevation of copper into the water, which has effect on eventually seagrasses at high level, oysters, larvae, so meaning you can also have very, very bad effect to the downstream ecosystem with that copper. I found that in one pond, I was able to measure 2,700 parts per billion. Now, it doesn't tell you much, but the limit is 3.7 parts per billion for EPA standards. They also build up with muck, so you have a lot of muck on the bottom, right? So with copper, eventually a lot of muck with in thickness, as well as muck with phosphorus, which also will perpetually feed the pond with nutrient that will continue. So even if you stop all the nutrient input, you're still going to have nutrient loading into your system because of the sediment that has accumulated a lot of nutrient. Now, do they recharge the aquifer? I'll be a bit brief here. They do not. We found that most of the pond I studied, actually most of the pond do not recharge the aquifer. When you're creating a void into the ground, they actually have more evapotranspiration, so more water evaporating than actually you have water recharging the groundwater overall. So I'll skip a few slides here, but that's basically what it explained here. I know I'm running a bit out of time. So that's the same thing here. Sorry, that was my timer. And then how do you fix the pond? So you have a plethora of ways to fix the pond. You know, you can use chemical. We've seen it kind of work, but it doesn't really help. You can dye the pond so it becomes blue to block the algae from growing. You can do mixing. So a lot of people actually use mixing, those aerators. That's one way. We did find that aeration is very, very limited, though. So again, it would take a long time to explain that. But we found that they reach out about 10 yards away from your aerators. So all aerators are also not the same, right? So you have the Rolls-Royce and you have the Peugeot, in French. So the Peugeot is not as good as the Rolls-Royce. And you can dredge, of course. Dredging is a big thing, right? So actually, we are going to be we're looking right now at all the lakes in the city of Naples, and most of them will have to be dredged. And that's very expensive. So this is, for example, Lake Manor, which I did the pre-dredging assessment, full of microplants here. This is a post-restoration, but look at the price tag. For a 4-acre pond, it costs $1 million to basically restore it. So again, you want to be preemptive. It costs a lot of money to fix a pond once you actually messed up. Phytoremediation, so that's one way, again, to use a pond as a filter. You want to plant. If you don't want to have a lot of plants around, there's also a technology called floating islands. So you can have your plant floating on the water, and they will pull out nutrient, as well as providing some algae control, because the plants release chemical in the water that controls the algae. They also oxygenate the water. So we have actually a paper and a master thesis here. And of course, this is the best one. You have the Friendly Landscaping Bill 2080 that should protect you to plant native in your backyard, even if your HOA doesn't want to. And you can make it really beautiful. And you can create rain gardens, ways to actually capture the nutrient. Everything that will reach your pond that's loaded with nutrient will create algae bloom. So you want to make sure nothing reaches the edges, and planting can be fun, as you can see here. Now, you can also use hydrogen peroxide. It's one way to control algae. There's some research that's been done here by a colleague of mine. Bacteria and enzyme is kind of new. We're looking at it. Finally, and that's why you're here, education is a big piece. So we actually are using here, I wish we had more, no offense, younger kids in the audience, but we're doing this for all the, not all, but a few subsample of middle school. And we're educating them because they all have a pond, and we're using the pond as water quality and the watershed around the pond. They do some planting, and they look at what plants do on the ecosystem and how they embellish first and how they also filter the water. And it's very important because there will be actually the generation of tomorrow, right? They're going to have to cope with the problem we have created, and especially we're focusing on low-income schools, because when things are going to turn sour, these are going to be the kids who are going to be staying here in Southwest Florida and deal with the problem. That's it. Thank you.